Today in episode 49 of the podcast, we will be reviewing the horror comedy Y2K and breaking down season 1 of The Penguin. So it's been out for a little bit now. We're excited to finally be able to talk about it. We'll also be talking about a lot of news coming out of the Harry Potter series. We might see Roy Kent as Hagrid. And we'll be talking about Lord of the Rings and how we might be getting a brand new epic film trilogy out of it in the vein of the originals. But I'm Brad, he's Josh, and welcome to We'll Bring the Popcorn.
As always, don't forget to give us a like and subscription on YouTube. It really helps elevate the profile of the show. And also give us a 5-star review anywhere you're listening to us in the audio realm. It really helps us out.
We also wanted to give you a reminder that our last giveaway of the year is live. So head over to our YouTube channel, subscribe to it, and then head to episode 48, which is the Moana 2 review and our Christmas favorite episode. Give that a like and leave us a comment on there what your favorite thing is to watch at Christmas. You'll be entered to win one of two $50 gift cards provided to us by our friends at Skyline Chili. We also have some movie memorabilia that we're throwing as well, but you have until December 14th to get your comments in there to be entered. We'll draw the winners on December 16th on that episode, so you've still got a little bit of time, but don't wait too long. Get those comments in, and you can win one of these gift cards.
Yeah, we're definitely looking forward to giving those away. Now, we want to jump into our news for the week, and there's some major news coming out about the Harry Potter series that's getting ready to start filming next year. Now, it appears that some casting is pretty close to getting across the finish line. There's some major names that are being attached to the show. It's going to be one of, if not the most highly viewed show in Max's history when this comes out. All eyes are on this show right now. Obviously, Harry Potter is a multi-billion-dollar franchise worldwide. We got some very interesting names that could be attached to some of the major roles in the series.
I want to jump straight to the most interesting one to me is because of who they're talking about for Hagrid.
Yep.
Because if you don't know the name Brett Goldstein, you should, because he's hysterical and a great writer as well. But he's known as Roy Kent from Ted Lasso, is potentially in the running to be Hagrid. He's being eyed for the role, which I could see. I mean, again, you had the great Robbie Coltrane, who has passed away now, did a fantastic job bringing Hagrid to life there. But, you know, they're going to be doing different directions and do different things with it, and I actually think it would be pretty fun to see Brett being Hagrid. It's going to be something a little different from him. He's going to have to keep it clean, because if you see his comedy or know Ted Lasso or anything, he doesn't keep it clean, so it'll be really interesting, but I think he could actually do a decent job at it. I know Hagrid's supposed to be a bulkier, bigger. No matter who they get, they're going to have to use some trickery like they had to do with Robbie, because he's a giant. So, you know, anybody's not fully going to fit it, but and some people have some issues because, well, they're not going by the book description stuff, but it's always going to have something, like, if it has the right actor tied to it, if they can do the voice or the emotions or whatever that character needs, then why not let them do it?
Yeah, I mean, it's going to be such a hard thing to follow up on such an iconic film franchise as it is. So many incredible people have played those roles and played them to a lot of people believe are perfection based on the books and just absolutely perfect adaptations of these characters on film. But when you take it into a complete reboot, it's almost impossible to fill all the shoes. I don't envy the kids that are going to wind up playing the big three, if you want to call it that, Ron, Harry, and Hermione. You know, like, those kids, when they get cast, like, just hope and pray that things go well for those kids, because they're going to be under such a huge microscope. But a lot of these major roles that you're going to have to fill to be, you know, true to the books, a lot of those actors are no longer with us, unfortunately. You have, you know, Alan Rickman, who was incredible as Severus Snape, no longer with us. You had Maggie Smith as Professor McGonagall, no longer with us. Robbie Coltrane as Hagrid, no longer with us.
Both our Dumbledores are gone.
Yeah, both the Dumbledores are no longer living. Like, it's like, these are going to be replacing iconic roles. It's not an enviable position to be in for anybody, but like you said, with the right casting, with the right story, I think they're going to do just fine. And they're getting some big names. Like, one of the biggest names we're seeing potentially be, you know, Albus Dumbledore is Mark Strong. Mark Strong's a very strong, somewhat pun intended, character actor, and you know, that's another big role that they have to fill. The one that I think is going to be the most controversial is the casting of Severus Snape. Obviously, Alan Rickman, an iconic actor in so many things, but the person that's being eyed for it is a British actor named Paapa Essiedu, who was in Murder on the Orient Express, among other roles as well. he's not a white actor. I think that's going to be somewhat of a controversy if he winds up being cast. But at the end of the day, I think if the story's right, it's gonna work, and it's gonna work well. And this is something that's going to be around for a very long time, because they're talking like this could be a 10-year project to adapt all of the books into what is being described as potentially one season per book. So you're going to get deeper dives into these books that could wind up being even more faithful adaptations than what the movies wind up being, having to be a much more truncated version of these longer books.
And as you can imagine, the internet is being completely civil and calm and rational about, him possibly playing Severus Snape. He's done a lot of stage shows and everything else. Like, he's been around for a little bit now. And if he's a good actor, I've watched Black Mirror, and we've watched Murder on the Orient Express. I can't exactly remember him, and I'm not saying he wasn't good in it. It's been a while since I've seen any of that. Like, I haven't watched the latest season of Black Mirror either. But if he does good in the role, then what does it matter? His race or anything else, but there's a lot of people's tied up on it. But I can get a few things when you're thinking about the overall story of Harry Potter and who, like Snape is to Harry, or who he's supposed to be, and exactly does that change, the actor for Harry? Is that going to be someone different, or are they going to go the same thing? So I can see a little bit, but a lot of it comes out of the dark, bad part, and not just because, well, he's not a good actor. I don't know. They're going after it for one reason, which is shame on those people for it. But if he's, like I mentioned with Brett Goldstein, if they tested well, if they read the lines well, and they feel like they can play the character really well, then why shouldn't they get a chance to play it? Like, I would love to see all that. And it's TV. It's not like in Hollywood we haven't had recasts and stuff happen, which some of them have been glaringly different. And you would hope you'd be able to keep the same actors all the way throughout. But it is really interesting to see exactly where they're going to go. Like, we still have a lot of the adult characters still being cast, a lot of the teachers. But there's apparently over 32,000 kids that audition for the lead roles. So we don't know exactly if that means just Harry, Ron, and Hermione, or if that's also Draco and all the other kids in the school. But I mean, that's a staggering number of kids doing this, because I mean, you had this, I think we mentioned it, you can go back and I'll find our episode number on that, but you could get your kids signed up for it, and you had to be between a certain age range when it started and everything else. But like 32,000 kids, because you had to either be British or Irish or Scottish or something like that. You had all these specifications. They still got 32,000 kids,
which is insane. But that's awesome. It's a big pool of kids to choose from. And to their credit, they say they're going through and reviewing each and every single one of them to find the perfect casting. Obviously, the likelihood of them being big names is going to be very minimal. But you had that same case with the three actors that wound up playing Ron, Harry, and Hermione. And you got them surrounded by incredibly brilliant actors who, helped elevate their performance and guide them along in their young careers. But this is going to be a big time commit for whoever gets this role. Like we said, it's going to be a 10-year project from the way they sounded like it. And filming is going to get underway at some point next summer with the intention of coming out. The hope was by the end of 2026, but it's looking like it's going to be 2027 now by the time it comes out, which, take your time and get it right, because they're betting the bank on this doing incredibly well for them. And I think it's going to do incredibly well for them. Like, it's Harry Potter, right? You're talking about rebooting one of the most iconic film franchises of all time that's still a major pop culture phenomenon today. Like, you see Harry Potter everywhere. You go to Universal theme parks, you go like anywhere. There's a baking show about Harry Potter right now going on Food Network as we shoot this episode. Like, it's still like ingrained everywhere in pop culture. Like, people proudly proclaim what house they belong to. I'm a Ravenclaw. Like, it's one of those things that it's made its way into all the aspects of pop culture, and for them betting the farm on this in a big way, it has to hit. And I think it will, given the right choices in casting and the right choices in story and the right direction that it gives. I'm very excited for the show to finally come out.
Yeah, I'm really curious with the potential 2027 debut for it now, what that means for it going forward. Because if you're looking like right now, it's late 2024 and they're casting for it to film in 2025. If it doesn't come out in 2027, if you're hiring a 9-year-old, they're going to be 11 by the time it comes out. There can be some big jumps in there. But if it's taking you 2 or 3 years to film, are they going to film season 2 in 2026 for potential 2028? So there's going to be kind of leapfrogging themselves until it's done, because you've got to think about that when you have kid actors and what they had to think about when they did the films, because some of the kids did sprout up and change quite a bit in between. And, you don't want to do too many recastings and stuff, especially when it comes to kids, because you get that established, especially in the first few films of that journey you're going on with them. And if all of a sudden, they change quite a bit, it's a big thing, because some of the books have a bigger time jump than the rest of them, but they've got to, I'm sure they're very aware of that, but it makes you think, if we're not seeing season 1 until 2027, but they're casting now, when is season 2 going to film? It's got to be in 2026. Like, they film 2025 and jump right back into it, while one group is working on editing, the other group is working on getting the next season done.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting to see how that shoot schedule goes versus when it decides to come out and when it makes its way into, all of our homes. But that's definitely one to keep an eye on and look forward to, because there's some very strong names already being attached to it, and I think the world is ready for, this reboot to come, and, just to see how they do with it. And all eyes are definitely going to be on it. It's going to do major, major, major numbers for Max for sure.
Yes, moving on to another reboot, we have Bill Lawrence. Of course, he is known for a lot of big comedies and stuff. He was behind Ted Lasso, behind Shrinking, Cougar Town, a lot of different shows. But he was also, probably one of his biggest one was Scrubs. That ended back in 2002, and it had a 9-season run, but the 9th season was a little controversial because it was a semi-soft reboot. You only had like 3 or so of the actors was a part of the 9th season. They moved it to a new area. Like, it wasn't the Sacred Heart that we knew. It was like a medical school, and you had a brand new cast, and it didn't really do very well. Like, season 8 for a lot of people was the end of the show because it had a really good ending, and 9 was... And Bill Lawrence even said, like, they came to him like, hey, we want to do another season. I'm like, okay, we'll do something. Well, it's been 22 years. They're getting the reboot. So Scrubs is officially moving forward with the reboot at ABC. Bill Lawrence will be involved. I don't think he'll be show running this time because he does have some deals with Warner Brothers and others that's kind of preventing him from having full involvement in, but he is involved. He talked about it on social media a little bit, but they are moving forward with the Scrubs reboot. They are looking to get as much as the original cast back as they can, which I'm looking forward to it. I mean, I love Scrubs. It was one of those that was kind of like his other shows, especially with Ted Lasso and stuff. Like, it could be so silly and over the top, and it could be hysterical and funny and goofy, but it could also have some stuff that really hits you with a gut punch. Like, I remember like when they had Brendan Fraser on there, and they had, they have had several deaths in that show, and they took, especially with, now I'm blanking on names for the characters now because it has been a long time since I've watched it, but they really hit you with some good gut punches in there that you got some drama when you really weren't expecting it.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely one of those big time, comedies that was around for a very long time. I was never the biggest fan of the show. I never really got into it and really watched it. There's so much stuff that was going on and coming on TV around that time that's just one that never made its way into my orbit. But there are a lot of people that clamored really hard to, get that show in for a 9th season. And then what they got with it was pretty controversial when they made it to that 9th season, because it was kind of like if I remember correctly, like a semi spinoff where it was like, I think they felt like they kind of phoned it in a little bit and kind of gave a half effort, but it's still, Donald Faison and Zach Braff were, two of their careers really took off after that show came on. And even now that you see some of these newer commercials, like the T-Mobile commercials with those guys together in it, and everybody gets that bit of nostalgia for, Scrubs and how much they love to just see those two together on screen again, that it was pretty magical. But I'm not sure what they're going to do as far as a reboot goes. Obviously, they're going to probably recast the entire show and, maybe start with something new. I'm curious to see what their take on it's going to be now versus what it was when it finished airing before.
Oh, they said they're trying to get the original cast back, and what capacity is it going to be? Because like you said, season 8 kind of ended in a really well done way. That was kind of the series finale to a lot of people. 9 was that reboot that it was kind of became a medical school more, where they were teaching in a classroom and going around, and the new cast just didn't fit right to what everything is. So I doubt they want to continue with that. So what do they have to tell of these characters after 22 years if they go back to either they act like season 9 didn't happen or exist or exactly what they're going to do. But I'm looking forward to it. They did talk to Zach Braff, who said he's all for it. Just maybe a year or two or season 2 to go back and have some fun with some old friends. Like, I'm down for that. So at least he seems to be on it. If he's in on it, I'm sure a lot of the others are going to be. But we'll see exactly what they can churn out of it, because I want to go back and rewatch it now that they've announced it, because it was one of my favorite shows. I really love that humor, along with the darkness and the heart that it had behind it. And it can work really well. Like, that same type of comedy that he did in Scrubs is there in Shrinking. It is there in Ted Lasso. So it's clear that his type of comedy and works still. But exactly what type of story do they have with these characters after so long? Because, 22 years, it's a lot of aging and changing for a lot of them. So we'll see exactly what kind of story they come up with, and all the jokes with the janitor and everything else that they come back with. I'm looking forward to it, but we'll see how long this type of reboot kind of lasts or, takes place, because they said it has been that long. I think we got the Will and Grace reboot that lasted for, 2 seasons or so. So I think a lot of the reboots that they've done have kind of been a limited, like 2 to 3 seasons, and they're done. So we'll see if this gets the same treatment.
Yeah, it might get like the Frasier treatment too. The Frasier came back for a couple seasons as well. Like, definitely interested to see like what they do with it and where they go forward with it, because it was a very popular show, and won a bunch of awards and launched several careers from that show. And it's gonna be interesting to see if they come back, how they come back and visit it, if they do pick up from where they left off, or like you said, do a little retconning from that season that a lot of people kind of deadpanned for, if a lot of people felt like it was a big time money grab, and that was kind of all that it was. But I'm excited to see, maybe some efforts put back forth, into it. I know I love Ted Lasso, so maybe it'll give me, my love of that show will give me a reason to go back and actually watch it, and maybe dig into that show too, and see if I have that same experience and enjoyment out of it that you did. I'd definitely like to check that one out for sure.
Let's see if we get any crossovers from any of the shows. We get Jason Sudeikis walking in hurt or something, or get Brett Goldstein walking in or something. I would love to see if he would be a part of writing any of that, because they worked together on Shrinking and Ted Lasso. They've been doing a lot of work together, so I'd love to see if Brett could take his humor and his writing that's worked so well for so many shows and bring that in to the Scrubs verse. I think that would work really well if he had Brett be a part of it, and he could make a little cameo in person, but having him as a writer behind the scenes helping with it would be fantastic to me. Yeah, but if he's Harry Pottering it, he may not have time.
Might be a little tied up as far as what he's got going on, but you never know. I'd love to see him a part of it as well. I want to move on to Lord of the Rings now, and we got some news coming out talking about potentially there being another trilogy. Or, on the backs of, you got War of the Rohirrim that's getting ready to come out. You've got the Hunt for Gollum movie that's getting made as well. And there's talks that you could get a potentially new trilogy. Now, what that's going to look like, what it's going to adapt from what's already been written versus a brand new potential story moving forward. It seems like they're going to kind of test the waters and see what the interest level is for something like that before they go all in on it. But there's potential for another Lord of the Rings trilogy that could be in the works, that people are definitely, at least in circles that I see, are kind of clamoring and hope that it happens.
Yeah, you had Philippa Boyens, who kind of talked about everything Lord of the Rings films. Of course, she helped co-write and worked on the original Lord of the Rings trilogy with Peter Jackson. It still works very closely. Going to be, I believe, working on Hunt for Gollum and everything else. She was talking, they have some more ideas for like some more animated or anime after War of the Rohirrim if it does well. Like a lot of this, she said, does bank on the fact that, all right, is Amazon still doing well with the TV series? Does War of the Rohirrim do well in theaters? Does Hunt for Gollum do well? Well, then we may have a new epic Lord of the Rings trilogy that's in the vein of the first 3 films and stuff. We might be able to do another one of those. But she also mentioned that they have a lot of kind of solo one-off stuff. That's kind of what War of the Rohirrim is supposed to be, is telling a tale at a different time from the main timeline that the 3 films told. That they have some other kind of one-off films from animated and live action that they have in the pipeline that they might do as well, which could be interesting. You just hope that it is taking care with the story, because this is on top of from Star Wars and Harry Potter and all that. Lord of the Rings is one with a rabid fan base that you have to do right by the story, and you have to really tell Tolkien stories well because he told it so well. Like, you've got to do right by their story, so you hope that these spin-offs and everything else you're looking at does well, and it's doing right by the story.
So what you're saying is these very passionate fan bases, once they get online, are very understanding
Yes,
and
very interesting.
welcoming of all new potential ideas that are, might vary from the original source material a little bit and take some creative liberties. They're totally understanding and forgiving of that, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's what I thought. Okay,
Perfectly.
In other words, but no, like it's one of those things that it's once a property like that reaches such a pop culture status that it gets these diehard rabid fans that love it and hate it at the same time. Like, I love to throw out the phrase "nobody hates Star Wars more than Star Wars fans" kind of things, and it's kind of the same way for Lord of the Rings. Like, there was a lot of initial vitriol and pushback and hatred, practically, for lack of a better term, online with the Rings of Power series when it came out on Amazon. Like, we've go back and look at our archives where we talk about season 2, where we had a lot of enjoyment out of it. It's not perfect by any means, but I think they finally found their footing there. And if you have like Peter Jackson really attached to it and really involved in it, I think that'll lend it a little more goodwill from those passionate fans if he's going to wind up being involved with anything that could be a potential new trilogy. I'm very excited to check out War of the Rohirrim. Spoiler alert, we're reviewing it next week. And excited to go check that out this week. I hope it does well. I hope you can go in and make more animated features based around that too. That could add a potential to be a lot of fun. Like, we talked about our love of Terminator Zero, which is a different kind of anime as well, that like takes that Japanese anime style and tells a Lord of the Rings story, or took like a Terminator story and made a wonderful story out of it. And I hope that they could get something like that as well. Like, there's so many different ways that you can tell like all these amazing stories, and if it's just done and handled well with care, I think at the end of the day, that's all we can really ask for.
And she did give us an update on the hunt for Gollum as well. So Philippa said that Viggo Mortensen has been approached to return as Aragorn. And they did straight away because I think she knew it was going to be asked. They're going to use, digital makeup, digital de-aging. They won't use AI because, again, it's been quite a while since he's done the original Lord of the Rings trilogy. But, she gave some story points that the hunt for Gollum is during the Fellowship of the Ring era. It's right before Frodo heads out to go to Rivendell that Gandalf tells Aragorn to go find Gollum. So it does look like Aragorn is going to play a pretty big role in it. So, she basically said it's up to Viggo right now. It's completely his call, whatever he wants to do. If he wants to return, it's his. But if he doesn't, that'll be interesting to see what they do, because they're tying it into the Fellowship, and it's got Peter Jackson, it's got Andy Serkis, it's got all them. So they're wanting, Sir Ian McKellen potentially returning as Gandalf. So if you don't have him back, but we all know that he still has a huge love for what he did with Lord of the Rings. His last film he asked permission to be able to use his sword from Lord of the Rings in that film. So he still has a huge attachment. I couldn't see why he doesn't say yes to it, but a lot of it is his feelings on the script. If he feels the script is good enough for him to come back after so many years to play Aragorn. But I'm looking forward to see what they do with that. Like, I'm still a little mixed on the hunt for Gollum of exactly what they're going to do, because it's not one of Tolkien's stories. It's one of those in-betweens of all this and side stories and stuff. But you've got Peter Jackson, you've got Andy Serkis, you've got a lot of the original cast that they are going to use potentially coming back. I'm cautiously optimistic about it.
Yeah, and I think that's the safest approach to take when you're talking about something like this. It is cautiously optimistic. You got all the pieces in place. Can it deliver? Can it give us a good story? Like, it's one of those that where it's going, you just don't know how they're gonna get there. And I think that's the tricky part, because there is no real source material to pull from in this, right? So it's this side quest story that could be a lot of fun, but what are the consequences? What are the stakes? What's the drama in it, other than you're hunting for, this creature that has the one ring and you're looking for him? Well, do they find him at some point and he escapes? Like, where's the crux of this, like, going? Like, is he out in the open and you drive him into the caves? Is that what winds up happening here? Like, is there enough suspense and drama to build a quality story to kind of connect where this is going to go with the Fellowship of the Rings when it really kicks off? Like, you know where they have to get to. It's just what route are they going to take to get there? And can you tell a compelling enough story that it's going to do well? That's the challenge that they have. But like you said, all the pieces in place are going to be in place. I could honestly say without having any obvious inside knowledge that Viggo's going to come back and play Aragorn. Like, it's going to happen. Like, the love that he has for that character, and he's just openly talked about how much that meant to him and to his career, which, you know, they won Oscars for. You know, like, it was a big deal, and, you know, getting him back in the fold is going to happen. He's going to be a part of it, and I'm excited from that perspective. I just want them to tell me a compelling story at the end of the day. That's what I want to see.
Yes, when you're looking at that timeline even further, it's basically when Gandalf he's at the Shire and everything with the celebration, and he learns about the ring, and he leaves to do his, you know, research and information and stuff. It's between there and Aragorn being at the bar and helping the hobbits there. That's where the story takes place in that seemingly small amount of time. Like, in the movie, at least, you don't know exactly how much time's passed. A decent amount of time's passed, but is this a week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks? But you're is it going to end with us seeing, you know, are we going to get Frodo and Sam and Merry and Pippin back and de-age them to have them be in the bar again and get to see them one more time as characters? That would be fun, but would it look right too? Because not only do you have to use CGI to make them smaller and mix up with the, you know, smaller stand-in actors, you then also have to de-age them to get them to look like they did 20-something years ago. So it's going to be really interesting to see the type of approach. But yeah, like, you've got that kind of small window where this story takes place, and we just have to see if that's enough time, like, and good enough story to bring Aragorn back. Because, I mean, you know, a lot of his story, and his story is huge to the Lord of the Rings trilogy. Is that a worthy story to tell something in between there? Like, when you're first introduced to him is in the tavern and everything, but now we're getting kind of a prequel for him, where you're going to see him going after Gollum, but how exactly, like, where was he when Gandalf found him? How did Gandalf find him so quickly, and like all that? So there's a decent amount of answers for them to kind of go after, and we'll see just how deep they go into those answers to those questions to lead us up to the tavern and the Fellowship.
At the end of the day, we just want, you know, a compelling story, and we'll see if they, you know, give us something that, you know, will keep our interest and tells it in a way that we're really looking forward to, you know, hopefully raving about when it eventually comes out. But one thing I really am looking forward to next year is Daredevil Born Again. Mm-hmm. It's my most anticipated show of 2025. I'm so excited for the show to finally come out. I'm a huge Daredevil fan and love that Netflix show. But Daredevil Born Again coming out on Disney in 2025. We got some news from Wilson Bethel, who plays Bullseye in the Netflix Daredevil series. He talked about, you know, this is going to take place about 5 years after the events of Daredevil season 3. So you get a little bit of a time jump there. I'm excited to see, you know, how these characters have lived their lives in the 5 years since the end of Deadpool season 3. And he also mentioned that it could possibly not be the end after the 2 seasons that they're talking about already for Disney.
Yeah, I'm super excited for Daredevil Born Again. Like, it just looked absolutely fantastic. But I mean, we know there was a lot of controversy. It started off where it really wasn't as tied to the Netflix series as all the fans wanted to be. And after filming, I think 3 or 4 episodes, they're like, nope, well, we got to start over. Got a new showrunner in who worked on The Punisher and worked in that Netflix universe, and it feels like they're feeling really strong about what they're doing with it now. And so, like, yeah, we may go farther than 2-3 seasons, because they did talk with their TV. Like, they did a lot of one-off, one-season stuff. They didn't really plan to move forward outside of that one season. And now they're like, you know, we're going to start developing our TV shows as being multi-season shows. So hopefully Daredevil is the one that kicks off and we get 3 or 4 more seasons or something, because I absolutely love the Netflix series. I'm so excited to see it return and, you know, get to see what Bullseye does in the new series. We've also got some new characters and some new villains and stuff, if you know, from the comics that you get to see. Like, it is one of my most anticipated shows of next year, and I really hope that they have nailed this. Like, it's got a lot to live up to. It's kind of like Fantastic Four for me. Like, fans have been clamoring for Fantastic Four to be done right. The film just wrapped filming, and now we have fans are huge fans of what, at least Daredevil, Iron Fist and Luke Cage weren't as well received, but Daredevil was extremely popular, extremely loved by those who watched it. So they've got a lot to live up to bringing this back. And, that 5-year time span is kind of interesting because isn't that about the same span for the blip?
It's pretty close. It's pretty close to that. And it's also been relatively close to the amount of time that it's been since that series wrapped up on Netflix. So that series wrapped up in 2018 on Netflix. So it's been about 7 years by the time the series comes out that, it's been since it aired its finale on Netflix. So the jump in time is not that unrealistic giving real life events. So that's going to be nice to see, like, a practical way to not have to go back and de-age your actors like we just talked about with the Lord of the Rings story. But, you get that real life time jump and you get to see where all these characters have landed now and how they integrate into everything that's already going on and has been, kind of exposed in the Disney, Marvel universe where you'll get these characters integrated. We've had Daredevil show up in a couple properties already. He showed up in No Way Home. He showed up in Echo. He showed up in She-Hulk, which, it feels a little bit more retcon than anything else. Like, you're going to retcon that.
But people absolutely loved him showing up in She-Hulk.
I like the suit. I'm not going to lie. I might be one of the few that actually like the suit that he wore in that. But at the same time, you're getting what feels like that dark, gritty Netflix Daredevil that I'm so glad that Disney's kind of letting that evolve and be its thing and, like, be a thing. Obviously with the success of Deadpool and Wolverine, you can go edgier, graphic, even in some cases darker. Like, they're talking about developing stuff for the Punisher, which I'm so excited about because John Bernthal is absolutely amazing as Frank Castle. He is by far the best Frank Castle that's been cast. No offense to Thomas Zane or anybody else who
Dolph Lundgren.
Anybody that got maybe some offense to Dolph Lundgren, but yeah, I said it. Come for me, Dolph. Let's talk about it. But no, like it's something that I'm just chomping at the bit to get my eyes on when it finally comes out, and I can't wait to go over it and talk about it week by week on the show here when it finally comes around. And I'm just ready. I need it in my life now.
Another show I've been really looking forward to more information on is Ahsoka. So we got the first season, which some people are a little mixed on, especially towards the ending of it. Like, I really enjoyed it, but there are some people who didn't like kind of the action sequences and some other things that happened towards the end of that series. But, we've been waiting for season 2 to start filming, and we finally have a timeline. So it looks like in April of 2025, we're going to get Ahsoka season 2 filming. I would assume that means probably 2026 that we would see that, which is also along with Mandalorian and Grogu, which just wrapped filming. We don't know if Ahsoka really has any part to do in the film. You would think, because there's supposed to be another film that wraps up Ahsoka, Mando, and all that. But yeah, we're finally getting season 2 going. But it was also kind of big because they filmed it in LA and they used volume stages for everything for season 1. But now they're moving to the UK, and so they're going to use a bunch of different filming techniques for season 2 that they didn't use in season 1. But that is kind of huge for the LA industry that Ahsoka is another property that's moving out from filming there.
Yeah, you're starting to hear more cases of it's no secret that California is very expensive. It's an expensive place to live in. I have friends that live in California. They talk all the time about how, like, expensive the cost of living is there. Also means high cost of shoots for production and everything. You're already seeing kind of more of an exodus of, like, TV shows filming in other locations, especially some of the more popular ones. There's a lot of shows that film in, like, Vancouver, Canada, due to tax reasons and everything. A lot of shows film in the UK. I know Wednesday on Netflix, which is a big one, you would think could be shot in LA, but they actually film it in Europe as well. Like, that's another show that's shot, out of the States, and it feels like a lot of these shows, for cost reasons, are moving out of the LA area to shoot, and it's kind of indicative of the high cost of everything. But it kind of sucks to see it for, obviously Hollywood is, depending on who you ask, it's such an important place for things to be shot and things to be done. And for the longest time, it was the staple to shoot everything in Hollywood. Everything got that Hollywood magic. Everything was shot there, and everything was so located that it's kind of expanded out across the world now. And, like, more and more places are getting opportunities to, bring that type of that type of thing into their economy and like shoot in other locations. And it's cool to see for everyone else, and it's kind of a disappointing thing to see for LA that like it's losing a lot of the shooting business. Now, it's not to say that the studios that aren't based there aren't still going to make a ton of money off of it, but it's kind of interesting to see like more things shifting out of there in a way than like 20 years ago, even. Like it was not as prominent as it is now.
Yeah, and it's kind of crazy to look at. Like, yeah, most of the big studios are based in California and they have their homes and stuff there, but it's like, oh, it's going to be cheaper for us instead of stay in the state that we're based out of to take all of our actors, production crews, technology, everything and fly it overseas is much cheaper than staying home. It's like crazy. That's a big problem for LA that they got to look at, because you even got actors and directors and a lot of people are moving out of California, Nevada, and they're going a little more remote and going away from California. We've seen a lot of like, I think what was it, Kelly Clarkson show started in California. Now she's in New York, like moved out of, and just you're seeing a lot of changes with California because of that high cost, and it doesn't seem to be going down. They're not giving as many of the cuts. We have seen Georgia step up and be a big area for TV shows. Most famously had The Walking Dead for the 12 seasons and everything that it had there. So yeah, it's kind of interesting, and it's bad for those that we know in California and those who are working in the industry out there, that a lot of these projects are leaving them, but are they still getting the same opportunities? Are they, well, I might have been able to work for Ahsoka when it was LA. Do I still have the same chance to do that? Because we know every area has their Teamsters and has their unions, and there's a certain amount of crew that you have to have from the area that you're filming in. So that's going to cost some people who may have been able to work on the show in California. They're going to have to look for something else and see if there's anything there, because they said it's like one in every five TV production now is being filmed in California. You're losing 4 out of every 5 production to another area now, and that's big.
That's staggering. It's not an insignificant number, and hopefully eventually they can figure out a way to keep that in house, and people there can continue to earn their living. But you got to also think if they're going international, like the legal ability to work out of there, applying for work visas and things like that to go work internationally and all that stuff. It's a kind of long and daunting process, but just to think that you have to go to that extreme lengths and it's still cheaper. Do that. That's kind of indicative of what could be a bigger problem in California than a lot of people realize. But that's definitely something to keep an eye on. And if you work out there, keep your head up, and hopefully you get back to work working on things that you want and things that you're passionate about. Obviously, we're big on that, but definitely something to keep an eye on for sure.
Yeah, and we hope that Ahsoka does benefit from what they're doing with it, and that it cost them something to be able to go over there, that it's not going to have the same look and feel, or not going to be able to tell the right story. We just hope that it works out for the production to be going over there. But we've had several of the Star Wars films and stuff have been filmed over in England as well, in the UK, so it may work out in the end for them and that. But the biggest thing with it is just what's going on with Hollywood and LA and all that, because there's definitely a big shift happening.
For sure. I want to move on to our movie review of the week now, which is Y2K. It's a comedy horror film. We just went and saw this over the weekend, and we're excited to talk about it here. Now, this film, we're going to talk about some of the spoilery aspects of the film. So if you haven't gone and see it and you don't want the film spoiled for you, we'll put the time codes in the description of the video and put the markers in like we always do. But if you haven't seen it, maybe come back and check it out check out our review of it after you've seen it. But for this film, it's kind of it feels like your typical teenage comedy. It starts off very much like a Superbad kind of film, where it's these two quote unquote loser kids that are high schoolers, trying to go to this eventually wanting to try to go to this epic party, and it's all about sexual interests that they have and all that other stuff. Seeing it would probably describe it better than I could. We're trying to keep it family friendly here. So this film is very much not family friendly, by the way. It's a lot of language in it.
It's a rated R horror.
It's rated
comedy,
R for a reason. So, kind of getting into it, it's centered around the Y2K. It's a fun take on Y2K and kind of the now looking back at it, the absurdness that people were worried about with, the world shutting down when it switched over from the year 1999 to 2000, how it was going to affect all the computers and the internet and all that other stuff. But this is very much a 90s centered film that kind of just takes some of the most absurd twists and turns. And in some ways, it was very entertaining and very, very, very cringeworthy in some parts as well.
Yeah, because it's kind of trying to be a love letter to those 90s, early 2000s teen comedies that we had with Superbad and a bunch of others. I mean, those were huge throughout the 90s. You even get Alicia Silverstone, who's big for Clueless and everything else around that time. She plays the mom of Eli, our main character. But yeah, it tries to kind of spoof, like, what am I saying, Dazed and Confused and Superbad and a bunch of different things, but it just does it very minimally. Like it's almost a movie in two parts. Like the first half is like Superbad. Yeah, they're trying to go to a party. Eli has this girl Laura that he really has a hot for, played by Rachel Zegler. She does well in the film for what they're given with everything, but it's all about his romance and what he feels with her. And then the Y2K bug hits, and then all of a sudden it's like, all right, we're just throwing everything out the window because it just struck midnight. Everything's crashing, but the robots have already risen. They're able to put themselves together to create big walking machines that they can murder and kill people. They've already created the video that tells all the other machines in the entire world. Well, you say the entire world, but it's this one town, basically, is all we get to look at. And it just kind of goes absurd from there. Like, there's just over-the-top deaths and graphic violence and language and drug use and just some crazy. Like, I had fun with it, but it is not a good movie in the end. Like it fails itself in a lot of ways. Like, it may be one that could possibly get like a cult classic status a little late. Like, we've had a lot of bad films get cult classic status because it's something you can really enjoy turning your brain off to and watching and laughing and having fun. But it probably could have been a much better movie if they would have just stayed a little more focused with that story, because like once they leave the party and they're going out into the world of trying to find this resolution, like the story kind of stops. Like it's barely moving most of the time. It's just one, okay, robot defeat, next robot defeat. Oh, now we know we need to go there. Okay, let's go.
Yeah, and it's one of those it's one of those things that it tries to keep you guessing because you don't know who's going to get it next, right? Mm-hmm. It starts at this part, like it comes to this party where there's a bunch of people in this house, and once the robots start to become evil at that point, like the electronics start to creatively find ways to kill people at this party, and then everybody kind of takes off afterwards that make it out of the house, more or less. And it just becomes this over-the-top, absurd, hot mess of a like suspense comedy, you know what I mean? Where they try to have moments of tension, and they try to break that tension with some very cringeworthy humor, I think. Now, don't get me wrong. There's parts of this movie where I audibly laughed like several times in this movie, where it's just absurd, and certain things in the film just make me laugh because there's a part of my brain that really appreciates like the sense of humor from a lot of things. It's very meta 1990s. Like it feels like this was written by somebody who didn't maybe necessarily grow up in the 90s, but had a lot of things that they could reference from the 90s in it. Like the cliques in school, like that were notorious, where you had the very clear lines between like jocks and freaks and nerds and like all that stuff. Like a lot of the tropes that you have for cliques in school are on display in this film, like the popular kids and like all this other stuff. And you kind of get an amalgam of our group that makes it out of the house that's kind of representative from each of those groups, and they kind of set off on their adventure, right? And it's over the top, it's absurd, it's funny, but it's dumb. It's kind of dumb funny, if I could describe it that way. But like I said, there's some very funny, like laughable moments in there, but there's just some of it's just like, okay, what are we doing here? Very over the top with drug use, very open about talking about drugs and things of that nature, and
the obsession with the condom all the way throughout.
Yeah, there's some through line things like that are in there, and it had, in my opinion, one of the funniest, like ridiculous cameos of all time, where they eventually go back to this video store that they had gone to in the beginning of the film where they rent their movies. And in the back, in the champagne room, as they like to call it,
hooded
figure with a voice. And anybody like us that grew up in the 90s that have heard this voice, and, you know, I'm admittedly a fan of the band, is Fred Durst from Limp Bizkit, who pops out. It's funny because Limp Bizkit's kind of a through line in the movie where they talk about, like, the freaks that are into, like, the rap metal and things like that, that wear the baggy Jinko jeans and the black t-shirts, that think Limp Bizkit's the hardest band ever, which, you know, they're very, for their right, late 90s, extremely popular bands, one of the biggest bands in the world. Like, that's not an exaggeration to say that they were, but it's very meta 90s of itself. But you get Fred Durst playing Fred Durst turned up to 11, and it's so funny, it's so absurd, so over the top. And you get Fred Durst, like, it's not just a brief appearance in the video store. Like, he winds up joining the team, like, on this, the rest of their adventure, and leads to some very absurd and funny stuff that it literally is one of my favorite lines I've heard in a movie in a while, where they're trying to, like, distract people while they're trying to shut down this, like, hive mind computer that's at their school, convenient enough. And Fred Durst just walks in, and he's like, "Do I got any biscuit heads in the house?" And you just hear this guy in the back go, "No!" Like, immediately. And I lost it in the theater.
Like, and the guy who's saying no is being held captive by killer robots.
Right.
But he's still going to tell Fred Durst, "No, I don't like
I still don't like your music. It's trash." Like, it's so funny, and it's so stupid. And I cackled at the movie.
Oh, yeah,
I about fell out of my chair. I was laughing so hard. Because it's just, that's the type of stuff that just hits at the right spot for me. It's just situational humor when it hits right is just so funny. In the context of the story where he's just walking in, trying to create a distraction. I'm Fred Durst. I'm a major celebrity at that time. And he walks in, "Do I got any biscuit heads in the house?" "No!" And it was just so stupid and so funny. Like, I lost it.
I vaguely even remember what was said after that, because he did some more lines about trying to move on with it, and they're still heckling and saying stuff. But I was laughing so hard from that. Because it was also the way he said no. It was like, no. Like,
it was so, you have to, if you see nothing else from that movie, see that part of it, and it's just so funny.
You're being held by killer robots, but your main focus when Fred Durst shows up is to make sure that you know. He knows that he sucks. Yeah, when he became that shadowed figure and he started talking in the back of the video store, immediately I started laughing, because I'm like, yeah, because there was a very brief glimpse of him in the trailers, like kind of a blink and you miss it. I wish they would have kind of kept it a little more secret, but because I hadn't seen the trailer as much, and this film really wasn't on my radar to look, so it did still catch me a little off surprise. Like, oh yeah, I forgot that Fred Durst is in this. There's also another cameo that we won't spoil on that, which was really funny, tied to Fred Durst and stuff. But yeah, he was just ridiculous, over the top, because there's Ash, who is one of the girls, is one of the kids in there, because there's a big underlying storyline, as you talked about, like, there's rap battles that are going on. So you've got one guy raps this way and she raps another way, and well, he's a more philosophical rapper and all this, and they're just having these dumb little rap battles with each other, which, I mean, that era was us. I mean, we were teenagers during that time, which this movie, I had to get over feeling extremely old when the movie started, because it's parodying everything that was our teenage hood and stuff. Like, oh, we weren't like that. Oh, we didn't have this. Oh, yeah, we were like this in a way. Oh, no, we weren't like, yeah, we were like this. I'm like, what? Get off my lawn. Like, I'm feeling so old. And you're seeing all the music references and Billy Blanks and other references. Like, it is full on, because you get dial up with AOL and AOL Instant Messenger, and you're getting burning CD-ROMs to make mixes. I mean, it's our teenage years that they're poking fun at with a lot of stuff, but it took me a little bit to not be the angry old man, like, what are you making fun of my youth for? Like, going after that. But it was ridiculous. It was over the top, but I think I had the most fun when Fred Durst showed up, because it was so ridiculous. Like, as I mentioned, like, Ash, she's been wearing a hat through the whole thing, which was very reminiscent of Fred Durst and stuff. Well, Fred shows up bald-headed, and there's that old, like, Aragorn getting the sword, or somebody getting the mystical weapon, and he gets his red hat back, and it's like, there's just a moment where he's putting it on slowly, and it's like, oh kind of moment in the film, but it was ridiculous and ludicrous. And they also, because if you've seen him lately on tour and everything, he's been rocking the old man look with the really long white hair and everything else, and they got him back to where he had the little chin strap,
like
and
he did in the 90s.
But there were so many fun jokes at his expense, which I'm glad he had fun with doing that, because majority of it was making fun of him. But, you got to listen to quite a lot of the soundtrack of the late 90s, early 2000s and stuff, which was fun. But I just wish it would have, these type of films are ones you go in to turn your brain off, to have fun with and stuff. But it was one that I wish it spent a little more time just trying to have more fun, I would say, because the whole stuff with the killer robots, that's the main story point in the end, it's kind of almost pushed to the side in a way. Like, it's the main focus, but they're scared of them, but they're not scared of them. Like, you see them face off against them and someone gets killed in front of them, and they're like, oh wow,
that's unfortunate.
I'm just going to stand here for a little bit longer looking at what's happening and watching it. Okay, I guess we should jump in this porta potty. That'll save us from a robot with a hedge clipper for a hand.
Practical. It's practical in so many ways, right?
That was ridiculous,
but
too.
it's meant to be like absurd and a parody and over the top, and I think they were in some ways effective with that, I guess. But it's a hot mess of a movie on a good day. Like, it's one of those movies that you do absolutely have to turn your brain off. And if you can get kind of caught up in the fun 90s nostalgia of it, and especially if you're like us that grew up in that time, you can appreciate a lot of the things that they're making fun of. And it's honestly, it hits some of the notes that it needs to in the right way. Like, it's funny. It's a funny movie. There's definitely some cringy stuff in it, but it's actually funny, and I get what they were trying to do with it. Is it perfect? Absolutely not. Not even anywhere close to it. Like, it's not a great film by any means, but it's fine. It was fine for what it was. I can't say it's going to change anybody's life or anything like that, but it was definitely a lot of fun.
Yeah, I had fun with it, but yeah, it had a lot of problems. Like I said, it was trying to be Superbad meets This Is the End, the Seth Rogen film, kind of like. It was kind of felt like a mashup of those, but it didn't really do anything as well as those two films did. Like, it's paying homage because it kind of does forget about itself for a little while there. Like, it's more focusing on the jokes of, oh well, here's the potheads who are hanging out and stuff, and oh, here's her ex-boyfriend who's this built guy that she really likes, but he wants to get together. Oh well, Eli likes her, and he sees him at the lake, and he walks away, and he starts becoming an angsty teen and mad and angry instead of this and that. Like, it just kind of follows the tropes of everything. Like, it's paying homage to those 90s and 2000s horror comedies and teen comedies and stuff, but it really doesn't do a whole lot new other than having Fred Durst be a character. And that was hysterical. You get songs, you get him actually doing pretty decently in the movie with, his acting is being him over the top, but it worked, and it was fun. And like I said, that other cameo paired with it was really fantastic. But like, the robots really didn't seem that menacing at all. Like, it was just, they were there just to try to bring some extra humor. But it got some graphic violence in it, but then it was like, all right, let's move on and do something else. Oh, here's a robot, let's move on and do something else. And it was just kind of weird. Like, it was fun, but it was weird. And it was one that I didn't have a whole lot of hopes for going into it, but I did walk out having fun. We walked out joking and laughing about it, and mainly we were repeating that line again, like, are there any biscuit heads in here? No. And that whole time, like I said, you get Alicia Silverstone in there. She gets to play a mom. She gets to do some funnier stuff, and it's like, all right, can we get Alicia Silverstone to smoke pot or something else? Like, it was just, what can we get these characters to do and these actors to do? Because it was just throwing as much crazy stuff, because it was directed by Kyle Mooney. He plays a character in the film, Garrett, who runs a video store, who's also the big pothead. He was fun in that as well, but it was also just so ridiculous because he's got the sticks, and then he's turning into almost like the Matrix for a fight, and then he's like, oh, and then he's gone, and like it was just ridiculous over the top. So in the end, Y2K was humorous. It was fun. Fred Durst being in it added another level, but it's mainly going to appeal to those who grew up in that generation, from those from the 80s and 90s who, 1999, 2000 was kind of their era that they were preteen to probably early 20s in that era, are going to get the most out of it because all the jokes, all the stuff behind it are kind of geared towards them. Because if you don't know who Fred Durst and Limp Bizkit is, if you don't know what dial-up or AOL was, you're not going to get a lot of the jokes that happen in here. So in the end, I would probably give Y2K a 5 to a 6, just because I give it maybe closer to a 6 simply because of the ridiculous laughter I was able to have with Fred Durst being a character in this film.
Yeah, I never thought I'd say Fred Durst had made a movie more watchable in 2024, but at the end of the day, that's kind of what happened. Like, he's fun in this movie. Like, he knows he's playing in a caricature of himself, which he's probably not having to stretch that hard with as far as the acting ability goes. You know what I mean? And you get a fun musical number with him in it as well, like just kind of creating this distraction. It's a ton of fun, just absurd. It's not going to change your life. It's not going to win anything. You're being a little more generous with the rating than I was, just because I don't think it was that good of a movie. I was giving it like a 4.5 to a 5.
I'd probably keep it close to the 5. The 6 was only just because I laughed a lot in it, but I laughed at how ridiculous it was.
And I think that's what kept it at that high of a rating for me, because it's not a good movie at the end of the day. Like, this is one that you're gonna watch, and I could be wrong. Like, you may get a ton of enjoyment out of this, and you may like it better than I did, but at the end of the day, I laughed. I had fun with it. Doesn't mean it's a great movie. Doesn't mean it's the worst movie I've ever seen. So that's kind of why it falls in that middle 4.5 to 5 range for me, where it's like, would I watch this again if like it's a random Saturday afternoon and I'm cleaning the house and I want to throw it on in the background? Probably. Like, I could see myself doing that, but you want me to sit down and watch this multiple times? It's probably not going to happen. But
so I mentioned it could possibly be a cult, slowly get maybe a cult classic status for those kind of stoner films and all that, the Half-Bakes and others that get. I mean, it's not up to the par where Half-Baked and others were, but I put it in the vein of those that maybe were not the best received, but there is going to be an audience that's going to really like it and kind of stick with it. Like, it could have been a whole lot better, but yeah, I think 5 is fair for it, but I said that's for us who grew up in that generation. That was our teenage years and stuff, so we got majority of the references, but because you've got a cast who most of them weren't even born at this time, which again, I'm not that old. Stop it. Like, stop making me feel that old. But like, it's going to be for our generation that's going to get the most out of it. So it's going to be very polarizing on who sees it, because if you are in your 20s or so now, that you're not going to get a lot of the references, or you're not going to really know a lot of the stuff that goes on in the film. And that's going to hurt it as well for people wanting to go back and see it or think it's even good, because if you don't understand the jokes, then what is there that the movie's offering you? The jokes are pretty much 90% of it.
Yeah, and that's kind of what we take away from it. It's probably geared more towards older audiences for sure. But Y2K is out in theaters now. Please go see it and form your own opinion on it. Don't take what we say at complete face value. We're just giving you our opinion on the film. If you think we completely missed based on this and you loved it, let us know in the comments. Also, if you think we're giving it far too much praise, like, please tell us. Like, you're like, no, this movie's terrible. We'd like to hear that too. We'd love to hear your thoughts on the movie.
And if you're Fred Durst, leave a comment as well.
Fred Durst, call us.
Just show up.
I would love it. I would love that.
Show up in the comments.
Yeah.
Have a cameo.
I'd love it.
Moving on to our TV breakdown of the week, we have The Penguin Season 1. So, of course, this has been out for a few weeks now, so we are going to go kind of heavy spoilers with it, with our overall recap of it. We watched it as it came out. We just couldn't really fit it into the schedule until now because of just how many movies we have, and we've got a ton of movies coming for the rest of the year as well. But, The Penguin Season 1 takes place about a week after the Batman ends. So we've got the Riddler has flooded the city, and, Batman is kind of MIA. We don't know exactly where he is. So the crime lords and the crime bosses are trying to stake their claim. So you have Oz continuing on that, he's working with the Falcones, but he has a bad meeting with Alberto Falcone, and he ends up killing him. And so that sets off everything for this season, because that sets off a chain of events, and we get to see a much deeper level to the Penguin. Like, if you're not a comic book fan at all, watch this show. If you are a comic book fan, watch this show. Like, this is a crime show. This is a mobster show. Like, you don't have to be a comic book fan to watch The Penguin, because I think it does such a great job of bringing a realistic mob take to it, to where there's comic book elements, but it doesn't really feel like a comic book show. And I thought it was absolutely fantastic. Like, Colin Farrell just absolutely disappeared, like he did with the Batman, but you get to see a lot more of it. Just disappeared behind that makeup. Like, he has a walk, he has a way he talks, and he holds his body, and all the prosthetics and stuff on him. Like, you can see it in his eyes every now and then, but he just disappeared in that role.
Yeah, this show is absolutely fantastic. It's incredible. If I had to equate it to a show that's come out, I would say it leans more Soprano-like.
It's a DC Sopranos.
Like, yeah, it's the DC version of The Sopranos, which lofty expectations to live up to, obviously. The Sopranos is one of the greatest TV series of all time, but I think it more than holds its own. Like, it's got incredible depth to these characters that you get to explore that doesn't take away from the overall, like, linear story that they're trying to tell, which is essentially this big inner gang, like all these different crime families are trying to take control of Gotham, where there's this power gap now that, you know, you're trying to take full control of the city, and everybody's got their angles that they're trying to work, and they work out in very creative ways. I want to take a second to kind of give the flowers to Kristen Milioti, who plays Sophia Falcone. She is probably best known mainstream as the mother in How I Met Your Mother. That was kind of where she kind of really got into the national spotlight, I would say, but she really shines and excels
Absolutely.
in this show. She is, with the exception of Colin Farrell as the Penguin himself, she is the bright spot in this series. She is incredible. There's so much depth to this character, who kind of gets put in Arkham Asylum as, you know, like, she gets convicted of these crimes, but she's also, like, painted to be this, you know, absolutely insane person, and just all the things that she had to go through to get evaluated and get released from prison, and all the, you know, the awful things she had to endure while she was in there, that kind of hardens her up to become this incredibly amazing villain throughout this entire season, where you find yourself wanting her to get caught again, but you also root for her to win in a lot of cases here. And they do such a good job of kind of like balancing things on both sides of the scale, to where all of these people are just awful people, but you find yourself rooting for them in different ways throughout the entire show. And it's so freaking good, man. Like, the writing on this is outstanding. The action is incredible. The acting is top-notch. It's stellar. The story is good. It's really good, and it's told in a way that makes sense. You don't have to be, like you said, you don't have to be a comic book fan to appreciate this. It's only comic adjacent because the characters are who they are. They come from comics. But this is very much not a comic booky kind of show in any way, shape, or form.
And I have to agree, she was fantastic as Sophia Falcone. Like, she had so many layers, because you can see the brokenness in her eyes and her mental state, because she went through so much. She spent so much time wrongly because she kind of said something off to her father about the stuff that they were doing, because, you know, we find out more about how, you know, her dad had involvement with all these girls being killed, and, you know, all these women that he was going through and everything. And, you know, we get different layers to Oz, because we see everything that he's a dedicated son and stuff, but there's a much darker aspect to it, because we've come to find out towards the end of the series that, you know, there's a lot of references to his brothers throughout, because his mom has dementia, and, you know, she's struggling, and she doesn't always know that they're there, or that she's there, and she only remembers Oz. You know, they're calling Oswald Oz more, Oswald Cobb instead of Oswald Cobblepot. He's Oz Cobb, which it's a different, to try to make him seem that this is his own kind of take on the Penguin. And yeah, and just everything with his mom, we do find out that, you know, his brothers were picking on him, so he locked him in the sewer while water was filling up, and never went back and got him. So it's like, we got a lot of darkness with him. Like, it's the same thing as Sophia with Oz, with the Penguin, that you cheer for him at times because you're feeling sympathetic. They make you feel like, all right, well, he's just had a hard life, and he's struggling. He's trying to do his best in this really messed up Gotham, because only the bad guys are profiting and doing well and stuff, and then he does something horrible, and you're like, okay, now he's a bad character. Now you're back to being sympathetic, and now he's backstabbing everybody. I'm like, all right, he's getting here, and he's getting like, you go on such a roller coaster with Oz, and like I said, that is so perfectly portrayed by Colin. Like he acted his butt off in this series. Like he just disappeared. You got all those emotions, you got all the feelings, you got drama, you got so much stuff out of him as Oz. Like it was fantastic. And then you throw in Vic and Victor, who became his right hand man. That he's with a group of kids who try to steal his car, and he's not having any of that. And he ends up taking Victor under his wing and forcing him that you're going to work for me for what you did. And you get a great dynamic between them, which also leads to one of the craziest parts of the finale and stuff too. But we got to go on a huge journey with Victor as well, because we got to see him. He's just an innocent kid again, kind of like Oz is, that you're getting the similarities between them, that they've just lived a hard life and doing this. But he's a much better person than Oz was, but he's been corrupted, and he ends up committing murder and doing a lot of stuff for Oz that he really wouldn't do. And that was very well played in the series as well by Renzi Feliz. He was fantastic as Vic with the stutter. But you also got Clancy Brown as Salvatore Moroni, but he was fantastic in it. He had a smaller part. He showed up here and there, but all I could picture was Mr. Krabs as a gangster. Because, that Clancy Krabs... But he was fantastic. Like, I'm not saying he did wrong in the series at all. He was great as well in it, but it's like, all right, Mr. Krabs a gangster. Let's go.
I love it, but he's also in the reboot of Dexter, like the next part of it too is kind of like the main antagonist in that too, but it's kind of see that carry over into this. But yeah, it's so dark and so disturbing in a lot of ways that it's like everybody, like you said, everybody has their own angles. So you've got Oz playing kind of both families with the Falcons and the Maronis. Like he's trying to, angle his way through both just to kind of get by, while he's also trying to climb the ladder for himself, right? So he kind of takes over this new drug that he's got trying to put on the streets, and he's trying to, carve out his own niche and network his own way up to the top to kind of ultimately take control of power for himself and ruin both of these families in the process. And he does such a good job in the series of walking that line so carefully and so close enough that at any moment in the series he could have been killed off, and it would have made perfect sense. Like he finds ways to just get out of things and get it close to it when you're like, there's no possible way that he can make it out of this, and he does, and some of it's a little absurd, but it worked in the means of the story. And one of the wonderful things that's come out of this is, one, you get these incredible performances, and it's going to be nominated for, Golden Globes.
Yeah, I think some of the first nominations for series this year just came out, and it was nominated for quite a few.
A whole bunch of them, and it should, and it's more than deserving. It is, for so many things DC has not gotten right in their films and things, like, because they've taken a lot of heavy hits for good reason. Now, I know this isn't necessarily James Gunn's DC and what he's getting ready to dive into, but this is about as good as they could do with any type of adaptation of something that I've seen DC probably ever. As far as that goes, I'd rank it up there on par with, at least from a TV perspective, in comparison to like your Dark Knight films. Like this is like of that quality in the TV realm, in my opinion. Like it's just brilliant storytelling. It's brilliantly shot. It's beautiful. It's dark, and dark in a way that makes sense, not only like conceptually but visually. Like there's a lot of dark visuals and things like that go into the show. It deals a lot of, mental instability is kind of at the forefront in a lot of this, because you deal with people having different psychological issues, like you said, with the dementia, with, Oz having his attachments to his mother. You've got Sophia with all the, mental torment that she had to endure, and, Vic coming up with the hardships that he had and the stutter that he had. And like all of these people have all of these problems, but they're, also taking that and making, using that as fuel to do the things that they do. And it's so brilliant. Just an absolutely phenomenal show that I cannot recommend enough.
Yeah, it's probably the best thing that DC has ever put out to me. Like, it was just so, because again, it can exist without having any ties to the comic book realm, which isn't, I say it has to do that to be good, but then if you're fans of Batman and of these characters, you get such a deep dive of a different way of looking into the Penguin psyche, because I absolutely love Danny DeVito's portrayal in Batman Returns, because you got more of the creature and he was disgusting and crazy and over the top, and you got some ridiculous, but I think that's one of the best things Danny DeVito had done. Like, he did a great portrayal, but this was bringing us down to a more grounded mobster Penguin, and you got the kind of the Penguin look to him because he does waddle because of his leg, and you do get later in the season where he wears his top hat and everything else, and you're getting more of the Penguin in it as well. But yeah, just Oz and Sophia, the way they wrote both those characters played off of each other so well. They just powerhouse performances between those two, because they both had so many layers, so much stuff, so much of a roller coaster they went through, especially with like Sophia, that she decides one day, you know, because you kind of see it coming, but it also catches you off guard that she walks her niece out to outside and lays her down. Like, I used to camp out here all the time. And then, okay, she's having a nice family. Oh, no, now she's releasing gas into the house and killing everybody so she can start it over under the Gigante name and start over. And it's like, oh, wow, that was one of the best, one of the better episodes. But I mean, there wasn't a bad episode. All 8 were fantastic because they each did what they needed to do to move the story forward. They each had something that they needed to tell and move forward and go with, and every episode was fantastic. Like, they did such a good job, as you said, with the writing, with the cinematography, you know, trying to match what they did with the Batman, but also kind of giving its own look so that it has its own thing. But like I said, there was just such great performances all around. The only thing that stuck out to me in this series was they had to recast Carmine Falcone, because the original actor from the Batman, he basically said, at first it was like they said that there was some conflict with schedules, but he basically came out and said, I didn't want to do it anymore because the Penguin was going dark and harder with Carmine Falcone being such a horrible person of killing women and raping women and everything that he did. He took a stance that he didn't want to be it. And they got Mark Strong to replace him, which I absolutely love Mark Strong as an actor, but he was in 2 episodes and flashbacks, and it kind of felt like a waste because he was one of my favorites to potentially be Mr. Freeze in maybe one of the other Batman films, and kind of felt like you've got such a big name in him that would work so well for other characters in this universe, to have him play 2 flashbacks and he'll be done, because we know we're the character in the Batman. So like, unless we get more Penguin seasons, which they are talking about doing more, he's kind of wasted in this version of the DC verse, which again, like, he was a front runner for me to be, because I think with his gravitas and how good of an actor is and his look and everything would have been perfect for Mr. Freeze, because I could have done a really dramatic telling with him. He was kind of wasted taking over as Carmine Falcone.
Yeah, I get that, but that's not to completely dismiss the fact that he could do it in the James Gunn DC universe as well. That's not to say that it couldn't be. It's kind of ruled him out of this, which I think it would have been a good fit, but you never know if they're actually going to pull a character like Freeze into something like this, which, given the darker nature of it, I don't think that's a direction they're going to go in with this anyway. So it's probably for the best that that character is not going to be involved in this too much, because it does feel like we're getting the darker, more rooted versions of a lot of these characters.
I think they could do with him, because his Mr. Freeze is all about, I mean, he's got that supernatural element to him and stuff because of being cold, but, you know, at the core of his story is a love for his wife and what his wife is going through, and he's trying to find a cure for her, and he's doing whatever he can, and he ends up turning to crime because of that. Like, there is a way that you could adapt, I think, Mr. Freeze into a more grounded, like they did with the Penguin with Colin Farrell. Like, I think they could do a fairly decent job with bringing that character. You're still going to have a little bit of the more fantastical with it, because, you know, as part of that, he does have the ice power, you know, and the cold and everything else. But I think there could be a way that they could do that pretty well and within this universe.
Yeah, I mean, I just know that they're kind of limited on time and like stories that they're going to be able to tell with this, because I know Matt Reeves is only doing 2, maybe 3 movies, if that. and then kind of calling it a day with that. Not to say they won't come back and do another season of Penguin necessarily, or they could spin something else off if they decide to. But it seems like Freeze is kind of off the table for this, which I'm fine with. I don't disagree. There's so many different Batman villains, which is why Batman, in my opinion, has the best rogues gallery of villains of all time, and I'll stand on business on that, because there's so many different dynamic ones. I've talked to you multiple times on how I feel like a character like Hush would be perfect for this, but I digress, and we could talk about that and have that debate all day. But at the end, though, it's such a brilliant show. We had so much fun watching this and kind of just going on this ride that was incredible. I'm kind of glad we watched it week by week instead of trying to binge this, because it was such a fun anticipating what was coming next. Like you said, the episode that ends with Sophia on her, familial rampage revenge, spree that she goes on at the end of that episode, and you had to wait a whole other week to see how they followed up with it. And it was a fun journey to take week by week by week that I think it benefited from that, to kind of let each episode breathe and stand on its own, that I think fits better for the type of story that they wound up telling for this. And for that reason, I say it's one of, if not the best DC TV series that's ever been made, in my opinion.
And I'm going to say, it kind of had that, what I would call now classic TV structure, that it did everything you needed to in each episode, but left you wanting for more. Like, you could binge it, but it's not made for binging. You have that time to process everything that's happened. Because, with streaming and everything, a lot of shows are in that kind of binge mode. Like, we'll release the whole season, you just watch all of it, and it's kind of structured that you can just watch it all the way through. But, this is the classic TV where it's good to watch it one week and wait for the next one to come out, because you get that anticipation. You're getting that mindset and thinking about what just happened and what's going to happen next. And I know a lot of controversy and a lot of stuff happened from the finale, because we kind of get a decent wrap up, but we're also left with a lot of open-ended questions, because we do get Oz kind of gets the drop again. It's back and forth throughout the whole series of who's going to win between him and Sophia, and he kind of gets a drop where it looks like he's going to kill her off, but he ends up letting her get arrested. And we get a moment where, all right, it's the end of the episode, it's nice, calm, peaceful, it's just Oz and Vic sitting by the water, looking out, having conversation, that, all right, we did it, it's over, it's good, we get just a nice, happy, good ending, just nothing bad happens, and just a nice, friendly, fun, good, calm ending.
Yeah, until it punches you right in the gut and rips everyone's heart out at the very end, and you're just like, so if you notice anything about the show, if you haven't watched it yet, there was the Justice for Victor thing that comes across. But what I think they do is they play kind of coy with it, because where it's like one of those, that's where it was very kind of comic booky, in the sense that if there was anything comic booky, was how they handled, the end here with Vic. And it's you think he kills Vic, but you don't see Vic dead. Is he actually dead? And there's some fun fan theories kind of floating around as to what they're going to do with Vic and who Vic could eventually become if he hasn't met his end in this, and maybe being a twist on a different character that you see in the comic books that could potentially turn to the good side and become, kind of a ally to Batman in that sense. But it does leave open the possibility of more seasons. There's been talk that season 2 is going to come at some point, probably after Batman 2 comes out, and I believe 2026 is when that film is finally coming out. So we'll get the follow-up to that and see if they, continue on with the Penguin. I know the Penguin's going to make an appearance in some capacity in the next Batman film as well.
Yeah, Colin said he signed on for 2 and 3, the Batman 2 and 3.
Yeah, so you're going to see more of him, which... thank God, because this is easily Colin Farrell's best performance in years, in my opinion. Like, he just completely loses himself in this role, and it's just an amazing thing to see. And even you talk about people like Renzi, who really most of his interaction with Colin was as the Penguin. Like, you get he's had obviously some interactions with him outside of the makeup, but he said, I think the first time he met Colin was actually in the makeup, if I'm not mistaken, and couldn't really tell it was him until they cut, and you get a little bit of that Colin, which just goes to show how good he is in this role, that he has completely disappeared, where if you didn't know it was him, you wouldn't have known that was Colin Farrell under there because he looks so vastly different. And it's
I want to give a huge prop. I mean to cut you off because while we're on that subject, I want to give huge props to the costuming, makeup department, everyone who worked on that because it looked natural, it looked real. Because also just how much stuff he had on him, you were getting the emotions in the face, which is kind of hard to do when it's filled with latex. But also we get a scene in I think 3 or 4 where the Penguin is captured by Sophia and he's naked and you've got a fat suit on Colin and everything else and it looks natural, it looks real, like they made up this heavier set scarred looking guy and they made it all look real and believable with how much prosthetics and makeup and suits. So big props to the makeup and costuming and all those teams that worked on Colin to make him look like the Penguin because it was just absolutely fantastic. Like they're going to win the awards for that because I can't think of anything else this year TV wise that had such good use of makeup and costuming that made an actor completely disappear, but you still got all the emotions. You got realistic look to everything. Like they did a fantastic job as well.
Yeah, absolutely top notch. Like the visuals on these were, in this entire show was just stunning and like I said, dark and just not only concept but dark visually as well. Like it was dark, but it's not like Game of Thrones dark, if that makes any sense. Where that, especially in that last season where that battle was just pitch black and dark. Like it has that darker tone, but it's still like so well done, so well shot, so well acted, so well made. Like if I had to put a number on it, I'd give it a 9.5 probably out of 10. There's a couple little things that could have maybe taken me out of it a little bit, but I think this is as good of a TV show as I've seen in a hot minute. And I would put it up there. Like if we're having like an end of year ranking on our favorite TV shows of the year, spoiler, we might do an episode of something similar to that. I'd put it up there with Shogun as far as like TV shows that I've enjoyed this year. It is that good.
Yeah, I agree. The Penguin season was a fantastic series. Such brilliant acting by Colin and Kristen and just everybody involved. Like it was such an amazing show. I would give it a 9.5 as well. Like I think they did one of the best things that DC has ever put out, but I think it's also one of the problems that James Gunn could be seeing. Like you have the Batman with Robert Pattinson, which was fantastic, and you got the Penguin, which was fantastic. This exists outside of his universe, but it was done so well. Like it's kind of creating competition within himself. Like, all right, they've nailed before I got here, with the Batman this. Now I'm doing my own thing. How am I going to do Batman and the Penguin and other stuff in my universe after Colin has just absolutely killed the Penguin portrayal? Like, I think it causes some issues for him. Like, they're going to have this where they have some portrayals in their Elseworlds in this other universe of DC that are some people going to look bad on this side because they did it so well because the Penguin was just that good. Like I said, it's a 9.5 out of 10. Like it's a fantastic series. It's well worth watching. Fantastic performances. It's going to win a ton of awards. And I said, we talked about how Colin and Oz was on a roller coaster, but with that final episode, like, you felt sympathetic all the way through until he did what he did to Victor, and now everyone and everything, the entire universe is against Oz now. He is a true villain, and that's amazing storytelling that you could have someone who's done such horrible stuff all throughout the series and has been a very self-centered, selfish, crazy guy, but it took that one act, which was to both of their acting and the setting of that scene and everything else. Just when you can go 8 episodes and it's not until the very end that you fully get in on him being a true horrible villain was just brilliance by them.
Yeah, absolutely brilliantly done. Cannot recommend it enough. All 8 episodes of season 1 of The Penguin are on Max now. Go check it out. We cannot praise this show enough. And, when you go see it, leave a comment on what your favorite moments of the show were. There were a lot to choose from, and excited to have that conversation.
Yeah, I will absolutely talk about the show more because it was so good. I'm probably going to go back and
100%.
do a binge watch of it now after watching because it was just that good. Like 100%. If you're into comic books, but if you're into the mobster and gangster stuff, you're going to absolutely love this series. Like it is so good, so well worth a watch.
Absolutely.
So moving on to what's coming up this week, got a couple interesting ones. So Sony hasn't had the best track record when it comes to their Marvel adjacent films. You know, Morbius and Madam Web, they've all failed. And now we've got Kraven the Hunter coming out, which, again, it causes, I would say, more confusion with what in the world is going on, because it's been shown that these Sony-verse Marvel films are in the universe, in the multiverse of the Marvel films, but we've got Aaron Taylor Johnson as Kraven, but he was also in the MCU as Quicksilver. You have Russell Crowe as his dad, who was also Zeus in Thor. You've got so many actors who are playing double roles in that. Like, it's kind of weird and interesting that they're reusing so many different actors from the MCU when they're trying to be MCU adjacent. Like, this is one that's going a lot darker than a lot of the others. Like, if you've seen the Red Band trailers, they're going very graphic with the violence. They're going pretty dark with it. I'm looking forward to seeing it, but there is a lot of hesitation when it comes to the Sony Marvel verse films, because there's been more misses than there have been hits now.
Yeah, because it feels like you say, oh, we're going to go see the next Marvel movie. Oh, great, what is it? It's a Sony one. You're like, oh, could it potentially be? But no, I'm excited to check this one out too. And the trailers look like it could be interesting. I always tell people, like, hey, we'll give it a fair shot. Like we said, we went into Madam Web, like, hoping it was halfway decent. Not the best film. We openly have kind of bashed that film, probably more than we should have. But at the same time, I'm excited to check this one out, giving it a shot, and hopefully it winds up exceeding our expectations, because I'm not going to lie, I don't really have any expectations for this movie going in to see it. So I'm hoping that it's at least watchable and decent, and we'll tell you what we think about that in the next
As long as he says it's Morbin time, I'm going to be fine and
If
happy.
he does that, I'll give it an automatic 6.
On the other side of the spectrum here, we have the first kind of anime Lord of the Rings film in the War of the Rohirrim. So it looks really good. You've got a legendary anime director behind it. It's telling an interesting story that, you know, is tied to the stories that we know, but it's kind of doing its own thing. I'm really looking forward to seeing how this does. Like, I like the animation style. I like what I've seen out of the trailers for it. You know, it starts off showing you Gandalf and live action Lord of the Rings stuff, and then they move into showing the anime part of it. But, you know, that's the biggest one to me this week I'm looking forward to. But I am giving Kraven a fair shot to see if it can hopefully pick up some of the misses that Sony's been having lately.
Absolutely. I'm a big Lord of the Rings fan. Everybody knows. I've talked openly about how Return of the King is my favorite film of all time. So excited to check out this, you know, animated feature about, you know, a similar story in the Lord of the Rings universe. And I'm excited to check that one out too.
Over on the on-demand side, we have the best Christmas pageant ever, Heretic and Venom: The Last Dance, of the last Sonyverse film, wrapping up the Venom series. You can go back in our archives to see what we thought about Heretic and Venom: The Last Dance. Those will be available to rent or purchase on December 10th. We didn't get to check out the best Christmas pageant ever. It looks like it could have been fun. You know, it's the Christian family movie of the season and stuff, but it looked like it could be potentially decent. It kind of came out in that time where there's 300 other films going on as well, kind of like Y2K. It just kind of shoved in there between Kraven and Lord of the Rings and Wicked and Gladiator 2. It's just kind of like, well, we'll just put it in here and see what happens, and then we'll put it out and see how it does on streaming.
Absolutely. Looking forward to checking that one out too, now that's finally made its way to home.
Yeah, on the TV side, we finally have Secret Level on Prime Video. So this is the video game anthology, which infamously has the Concord video game series that was canceled a couple months ago, has an episode for it. You've got Pac-Man, a lot of Sony stuff, Mega Man, a lot of different anthologies. I'm looking forward to it to see exactly how they do. They've got the Blur Studios, who've been, you know, huge in some Netflix series along with video game cutscenes and stuff. So I'm looking forward to see what they did with it. I'm not going with a lot of high hopes, especially with how many stories it has, or just going to get little bitty bit stories. We'll just see in that time frame if they're able to give us something decent out of it. Another show that my family loves watching, and it's not the latest season, but it's another holiday special for Lego Masters. The Celebrity Holiday Bricktacular Season 3 is on Fox on December 10th. Secret Level is also out on December 10th. But I really enjoy the Lego Masters series because it's just been a lot of fun to watch and see what they can do with bricks. And doing the celebrity stuff has also been quite a bit of fun because they pair them with a master builder and see what they can come up with. And of course, the master builders doing most of it, but there's actually been some decent stuff that's coming out of these celebrity ones.
It's always neat to see like creative minds at work putting together some of these incredible designs. Like some of the stuff you see are just like, how do they come up with this and how can they make this work? And some of the stuff that they come up with just will blow your mind. And it's a fun one to check out, to just kind of turn your brain off and enjoy. Like enjoy some fun stuff for sure.
The last season had some definitely really creative master builders of what they, especially with motion, because they had to do roller coasters and all this other stuff, like what they were able to come up with. Like,
it's wild.
Didn't know you could do all that with Lego.
Hey.
And come yell at me in the comments, because I've never seen Dexter. That's a series I have never watched, because a lot of stuff that came out on Showtime, I never really had a subscription to Showtime. So most of those shows I never watched. And we do have a prequel series, Dexter Original Sin, on Showtime, debuts on December 15th. So if you're a fan of Dexter, you know, it had a controversial ending to its series and stuff. We'll see how the prequel does for fans and stuff. But for fans of the series, I hope it's good and you enjoy it. But it's one I've always wanted to see, but I've never been really like a Showtime viewer. It's one of those, because you've had HBO and Cinemax and Showtime, and you get different bundle deals. Showtime was always one that was kind of outside of a lot of those, where like, oh, we got HBO for free, or we got Cinemax for free. We never really got Showtime for free, so I didn't get to watch it.
Yeah, Showtime's notorious for having some really, really high-profile shows, though. Like Peaky Blinders is one of the big ones that was on Showtime. Dexter, one of my favorite series, honestly. It's really good. It's very graphic, very violent, but a lot of smart writing. It's notorious for having one of the worst series finale episodes ever. But what I love is they came back a couple of years ago and kind of redeemed it with a continuation, kind of one-off like season of the show, where you kind of get a little bit more of a satisfactory resolution for Dexter in that one. I won't spoil that if you haven't watched it, but definitely one worth checking out. The follow-up to that I think kind of helped redeem that in a lot of fans' eyes, but I'm excited to check out this prequel series as well.
Yeah, so you'll be able to see that on Showtime December 15th, but, you know, as we get closer to the holidays, we're getting less and less premieres, because it is that time, especially with broadcast TV, that they start taking their long breaks, because everyone's traveling, got the holidays and everything going on, so it's kind of surprising it's kind of hitting so late with December 15th, right before Christmas, to get this going, but it's what we've talked about again. We're getting a lot of horror. I mean, this is not a horror show, but we're talking about murder and everything else, that we're getting so much murdery stuff during the holiday season here.
It's a good way to let out some aggression, right? For the holiday season, we're all stressed out, right? So let's watch this show about a serial killer, right? So it's one of those that, like I said, I'm looking forward to checking out. If you haven't watched Dexter, go check it out. If you have, go check it out as well. It's definitely one to keep an eye on for sure. But that's going to do it for this week's episode. Once again, we can't thank you enough for your continued support. For all the information about our show, please go to willbringthepopcorn.com. You'll get access to all of our archives, our merch store, as well as all of our previous episodes and all of our social media information. But coming up next week, we will be reviewing Kraven the Hunter and Lord of the Rings, War of the Rohirrim. I'm excited to check out both of those films and review them next week. But until then, I'm Josh, he's Brad, and we'll see you next time.